Thank you very much for making us a part of your first day here at TechEd.
That doesn't work.
Oh, yeah, look at you. Okay. So the session is getting started with cloud and business intelligence. My name is Pej Javaheri. I'm here with...
My name is Tarun Tarin. In case you're wondering, I still haven't forgiven my parents for that first name, last name combination. But I'm a product manager in the SQL Azure group at Microsoft. I've been working on Azure since PDC 08 when it was first released.
And I'm on the BI team for Microsoft. So the two of us are going to walk through what is SQL Azure, what are the tools that are available, what are some of the things that are coming down the pipe with SQL Azure, how you can use that in your BI applications today using product from Microsoft that's out today. Have some fun with some demos, go through and show you some of the things that you can deliver, some of the tools that are available to you, and so on. One, does that sound like a good use of time? Yeah. Great. How many people here are already using SQL Azure? Oh, so a couple of you. Fantastic. You'll be able to tell us a few things, right? All right, excellent. CTP of reporting, SQL Azure reporting. I'm ignoring Andrew. Data sync. What else are we showing?
Power Pivot, Data Market.
Oh yeah, Data Market. Andrew, put your hand down. Andrew's a very close friend. He gives us feedback constantly. Right? Right. Okay, from a BI point of view, how many people are familiar with SQL Server Reporting Services? Fantastic. 2008 R2? 2008? 2005? All right. Power Pivot? So you know it well. Use Power Pivot against SQL Azure? Okay, 1, 2. Okay, so that gives us a good, did you want to ask something?
No, not really.
It gives you a good sense? Okay. So just to level set, and you guys thought I didn't have 70 slides. So overview of cloud and BI, integrating data within the cloud and business intelligence, and then BI services in the cloud. Just give you an overview of what we've got coming and what we can do today, what you can expect. I know it's the last session of the day, so our goal is to hopefully make this as fun and interactive as possible and let you get out and enjoy what appears to be sunny weather that's creeping out, or get ready for the activities that are going to be later tonight. Feel free to ask questions. Thrun and I are very good at deflecting. Right? No, we'll answer the best we can. If we can't answer your specific question, we definitely want to follow up with you, and we'll either after the session or at the booth, we'll have everyone that's on both sides there that we can dig in deeper to your specific scenario.
Yeah, I'll be at the SQL Azure booth right after this, and you'll be at the BI booth, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Just look for the bald guy and the semi-bald guy. We'll be good.
The balding guy. All right.
Okay, so just to level set what we mean from Microsoft's BI and I'm just going to play this out a little bit. From a BI point of view, there's two paths that we're taking. One is the traditional path, which is as IT and SQL database administrators and IT professionals and users, we're building systems that are, going through a process, right? BI as a methodology, right? It's about gathering information, sharing information, organizing information so it can be consumed in a proper format. That usually means denormalizing. I was about to say demoralizing, but it's denormalizing. It's been a good day, let me tell you. I'm going. It's denormalizing that information, making it either department specific or function specific, and then sharing it out through standard tools, right? So those are reports, those are dashboards and scorecards, and then providing analysis on top of that. And for us, that has been the traditional view. A lot of vendors do that. Microsoft's no different, right? And in that process, we have things like master data services, so master data management capabilities. We're introducing with SQL Server Denali data quality services. We made an acquisition almost 24 months now to bring data quality into the mix. So expect to see that in the upcoming release. And of course, bringing data from multiple systems and integrating those using integration services. And then On the front side, you have Excel. You have, obviously, SQL Server reporting services. But where we see all of that coming together from the traditional point of view is within SharePoint. So you see a lot of investments from us within the SharePoint environment. So whether it's to create a portal, create a report managed environment, right? So you use SharePoint for versioning, for history management, for content management, for search, as well as a variety of other things. And the reason for that is one, you don't want to see multiple portal technologies come from us. You want to see a single environment. Two, more importantly, it's where we find a lot of people are just working, right? Unlike, let me ask you a question. If you were in one of my earlier sessions, you may have already answered, and I'll ask you to answer again. How many people here wake up and go, I'm going to go do BI today? No, there's a couple, right? Be proud, man. That's what I do. I wake up and go, I'm going to go do BI today. That's my role. How many of your users go and wake up and go, I'm going to go do BI today? Exactly. Well, you're special. I've got stuff for you. All right. And the reason for that is that they're going to run a campaign. They're going to do a marketing promotion. They're going to do some analysis on what are their top 10 customers, right? They don't call it BI. They call it work, right? And where do they work? They work in Office. They work in SharePoint and whatnot. The thing that we're trying to do as a company is, while we're preserving the IT-centric view of moving data up the chain and getting it to users, the other one is we want to enable users to do more of their own analysis, do more of their own reporting, right? And I think everyone calls it self-service. I think from us it's a little bit different. We're embedding this technology into Excel, right? By the way, do you know what the one feature that every single BI vendor shares? Export to Excel. Export to Excel. Every single BI vendor has it. So we came out with Power Pivot and said, forget export to Excel. We're just going to put it into Excel. We're going to have users start within the tool that they want, be able to bring data in. And with Project Crescent, did you guys all see that? Yeah? What'd you think? What'd you think? Yeah, good, kind of, maybe? All right, some of you saw it. So with Crescent, we're adding self-service reporting on top of that. We want to make it easier and introduce the F word into report design and creation. Do you know what word I'm talking about? Fun. Excellent. I always get scared when I ask that question. Right? If you're French, it's okay, because it has a completely different meaning. Right? But we want to bring fun into that. And the goal for us is to really bridge the two sides. And from us, it's a managed self-service BI experience, because we want to enable IT to be able to manage and have oversight into the technologies, the reports, the cubes that are being created, and then be able to bring that into a much richer environment on the server. So that kind of gives you the two sides. And there we are, shattering the glass. Okay. And then some of the challenges that you guys are all facing. What do you do when one of your business units or user group comes to you and goes, hey, I need to do more reports, or I need to get reports on marketing that show campaign management, or I need to analyze my website traffic and environment. You get them to fill out a form. You then provision the hardware. You will obtain the hardware, go buy all the software, build the application, deploy it out. And that takes time, right? And what we want to do is help you bridge that time gap. We want to enable you to be able to get access to information faster, get your applications developed a lot quicker, right? And make it seamless for you to provide value to the rest of the organization. My favorite stories, I was always, when I visit a customer, two favorite stories. One was, I was talking to the CIO, and the CIO had to leave during our meeting, and I caught up with him after. I was like, hey, is everything okay? You jolted out of there. What's wrong? Anything we can help out with? And he's like, yeah, I just found out that I have this mission-critical app that I had zero visibility into, right? And someone had built an Excel app that nobody else knew about it until it didn't work anymore. And then the other one was around, constant feedback I get is, hey, I have to create all of these reports. How do I enable my users just to create their own reports, right? And what we want to show you is how you can be out of the business of doing change requests and be in the business of moving the business forward, right? Did you want to add anything?
Not really, but thank you.
All right. So the cloud. You've heard a lot. You saw it today. Private cloud, public cloud. To us, it's really helping you be able to, well, one, do more with less, allow you to have some elasticity, and I know a lot of people throw that word out there, but it's about being flexible and agile in developing your applications, deploying those apps, making it easier for you to be able to maintain those systems once, not having to go around popping every machine. And you saw a number of tools this morning, right, during the keynote, if you were at the keynote, of how we're helping you go do that. But really, the cloud is about how can you do things faster, smarter, with less resources that are available to you, because we know budgets are getting cut. At least I know my budget's getting cut. And then be able to have access to this technology no matter where you are, right? So whether you're building a phone app for your organization, you're building, or you're like Ticketmaster, where you're building an app and you need to scale because it's a hot concert in a specific region. You don't have to go buy all those servers. You can actually go in more of a utility model, turn those servers on, use it for the consumption, and then turn it off, right? And you didn't pay for that, right? It's a one-off service. So building out very unique applications, or maybe even changing your business model. In that example, I believe Ticketmaster changed their business model, where they had just-in-time resources for the events that they were running. And they were able to utilize their infrastructure a lot smarter, and they can devote that to other applications. Okay. And then and we talked about, there's many different options for private clouds, public clouds, clouds in general. And then you have your users have a number of choice of accessing that information, whether it's phone, slates and iPads, how they want to experience that data, how you go about creating that infrastructure is also important, right? We have appliances now, we have box software, what is it called, the ABCD? Appliance, box, and cloud, and devices, right? These are all the things that you can bring together to create your private or public cloud.
Yeah, I think when people talk about cloud, there's often a lot of confusion. Cloud means different things to different people. And if you want to get some of the benefits mentioned in the previous slide, like the reduced economics, there are different ways to go about it. And I guess since SQL Server forms a key part of the BI puzzle, people consume it in different ways. And the idea here is to give them as many options as possible. So you can build it yourself, with reference architectures for private clouds and things like that with Denali. You can buy it ready-made as an appliance with everything pre-configured already. Or you can choose to consume it as a service from a public cloud run out of Microsoft data centers. That's with SQL Azure. And very often when people think of BI in the cloud, it's not just any one of these. And it might span these environments. They might move selective items to any one of these deployment areas. But the core principle for us is to have a common set of tools across all of these things. So the underlying deployment the deployment area is completely transparent to the person who's developing for it. So you have a common set of tools, and you'll see that with SQL Azure. You use the same set of tools that you use to build on-premises databases as you do for cloud. And you have data synchronization technology to synchronize data across those things. And even open frameworks like OData support built into all of these to expand the reach of this data across all of these different devices. And we'll explore each one of these areas in subsequent slides.
How many people are building their own cloudy thing? Couple of you? Yeah, I say cloudy thing because as Tarun said, it's dependent on your requirements. How many people are using some cloud infrastructure? Couple of you. All right, and how many people are building it using appliances? No one. One of you. All right, thank you for being the token gentleman to put the hand up. Right, and I think, when I think of cloud, when people started talking about cloud, I got very foggy, right?
Got cloudy.
Come on, that was an easy one. Right? But it's all about how do you want to get started, and there's a lot of, there's things like scale and consolidation and price that come into play. All right? So when we think about business intelligence, what we want to do is give you an idea of, okay, cloud is great. You're going to hear a lot about it from us and from a variety of other vendors. How do you get started? What are the things you can do? So some of you are already on that whole private cloud movement. That's fantastic. You're building out your infrastructure. You're isolating the right applications that you want to move onto this and consolidate and make available across your geographies. But we want to throw out, what are the things that you want to go do? So data size is definitely important. And are you looking for scale out versus scale up? Right? Because those are each equal considerations to take of the, what am I trying to build and who's going to access this information that I make available. Data sensitivity is a key one. How many people here are not from North America? All right, so you want to be careful where you're concerned. Where is your data stored? Right? Is your data stored within your geography? Is it stored in somebody else's geography? Right? You need to be sensitive to that. Do you want to store your HR information in another geography? Right? Laws are different in those other geographies, so you want to make sure that you're aware of the type of application that you're building, the sensitivities that come around that. Latency is another one, right? So, if people have to have access to the information quickly, do you have the right infrastructure to support that? Does the cloud help you in that, in making it available quicker, faster, right? So for your SLAs and your other contracts that you make with either your other business divisions, your partners, and your customers. I think those are equally all important. Okay. And then, so cloud-enabled BI, and then there's BI in the cloud. So cloud-enabled BI is, as Tarun mentioned, Microsoft has a variety of infrastructure that's available to you. We're going to show you some of those. And basically, that's enabling you to offload some of your assets and leverage the cloud, but still use your content, your own systems internally to produce, to publish, to make available to your business users, right? And I'll show a demo of like throwing data into SQL Azure, using reporting services against it, bringing it down in a Power Pivot, how you can enable your business users to do that, right? And the key thing there is there's lots of data everywhere, right? Data to me is like water, right? It's literally, it's within your organizations. There's people with access databases and Excel databases on their desktops that they're using. You've got your own infrastructure, right? And you want to make, and what you want to do is bring all of this together, right? So that's the key point there. So let me ask you this. If data is like water, what is information like? Wine? Come on, data is like water, information is like wine. I get it, end of day. And then there's BI in the cloud. So that's where you actually offload your entire application to the cloud. You're leveraging the services that are made available. So it's really BI as a service, right? That you want to make this available. You're taking the entire app and moving it. And of course, you've got to worry about the sensitivities that we discussed. And here you've got a lot of options. Do you want to make BI as a service to your organization, but create that infrastructure yourself? Or is this something that you're going to go and maybe use something like SQL Azure to do, or offload it into another environment, like a VM role type of thing, so like leveraging technologies that Rackspace as a hosted provider enables, as well as a variety of others. Okay. I think I'm at my slide point. Okay. We'll see if this works. This is my fun demo, because I get to do a command prompt demo, which I haven't done in a while. So, so all of this I'm demoing is today's technology. Nothing is futures. I'll let you know when we hit into the futures. But basically, I'm using SQL Server Management Studio. Here I have a list of all of my databases, right? Some of them are very familiar to you, AdventureWorks and so on. And in here I have my SQL Azure database instance. And I've got a bunch of databases that's there. And I've got a particular database called Time and Expense Track Loading that I want to make available because I'm building an application that's much more global. And I don't want to purchase the infrastructure myself. I don't want to go about and provision all of this. Budgets are tight. When I'm going to Microsoft, I just want SQL Azure databases. I'm fine with the SLA that you're giving me, but I want to move my data into that environment so I can start making it available to more people. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a labs technology that we just came out with. Let me just get it going. Right? And basically, I've created what's called a backpack of my data. I've taken my data and all of my schema, and I've packaged this up from my on-prem environment, and I'm now moving it to SQL Azure. So the command line is just facilitating that request. If you go to SQL Azure Labs, this is the page. It's called Data Import and Export. It's a very exciting name, right? You all remember that Seinfeld episode? I'm an import-exporter. This is SQL Azure's version of it. But it's really neat. And the reason I bring this up is, one, I don't know if people know about SQL Azure Labs. There's a lot of cool technology that we're coming out with on that site. But you can use this internally as well. So I can package up a backpack, and it's actually called a backpack file. And it has the data and the schema, all my indexes, all stored procedures, all of that fun stuff. And I can move it to any other database environment, right? I can move it to another SQL Server environment. In this instance, I'm moving it to SQL Azure, but it can go to another database if I wanted to, right? So it's a nice utility that packages everything up for me and makes it available for me to move into another environment. Right, so
things I want to mention about this tool is that we released it a couple of months ago. It's in SQL Azure Labs, but it's based on the Denali bits of SQL Server. So it's an example of some of the on-premises tools showing up in the cloud first before they show up on-premises. The existing DAC framework tools that allow you to package your database objects and schema and everything and move it to the cloud, but not the data. Now you've got a single file that packages your schema, objects, and data together, the file with an extension backpack, not DACpack. And that's what he's demonstrating over here. So you can go download those tools from there. The setup is a little cumbersome now, but we're going to integrate this into the management portal. And the nice thing here is it can take all your existing SQL Server objects, and it can even tell you what aspects of that are incompatible with SQL Azure in the cloud, and package it into a nice little unit, which you can then recreate in the Azure cloud. Right now, it's a set of command line tools, but this will be integrated into the UI, and you should see that in our next service release, which should come sometime in the summer time frame. Yes, you got a question?
What about large databases?
So there are some considerations for large databases. This does support large databases as well, but we have to look into things like latency over the cloud and so on. So that's all going to affect the performance of this.
Was your question large databases to package up or to deploy? Yeah, I think so.
Oh yeah, 20 gig database. I moved a 20 gig database using this, so it should be fine.
Yeah.
Did you get a nice bill?
You are charged for bandwidth when you use the cloud. So, I mean, bandwidth forms a relatively small percentage of your total cost in the Azure cloud, but depending on the size of the data, that can grow. You're right.
So, is there a way to bypass the charge for importing into SQL Azure, being that we're going to be consuming it? Do we get charged for that? I mean, I tried this a long time back, and I got a nice bill.
Yeah. And I'll be happy to discuss this with Moin. His question was, are you charged for bandwidth moving data into the Azure cloud? Generally, you are, and like I said, if you look at the rates for what you're charged, that forms a relatively small percentage of the bill. But if you're moving large volumes of data, that can certainly have an impact. And that's something for you to judge. I mean, it was one of those data considerations we had for moving BI in the cloud. I'll show you data synchronization technologies that we're using later, some of which just move the differential over to the cloud, what's changed since the previous time. So you might take a hit the very first time, but other times it really depends on the pattern and how you're using it. Right.
So just for full disclosure, here's my backpack file, even though I know it's a backpack, but it's a backpack. And I moved it over. That's a pun on words. And then, so it wasn't that large, so I'm not getting charged a lot of money, thank God. And it's moved all those files over. And let me go over into my SQL Azure environment. I'm going to refresh it, and I should have the time and expense track cloud is which I called it to differentiate between my local one. Right, so here's the same database with the same tables and whatnot, and I've made this available. Now, I can pop into BI Developer Studio. And right now, BI Developer Studio is, I think you guys are all familiar, uses the Windows Visual Studio 2008 shell. And you guys heard about Project Juno? Right, so in the next rev, all of this gets integrated into Visual Studio 2010. In fact, all the management tools for SQL Server all become part of the Project Juno. So BI Developer Studio, SQL Server Management, and all of that go into one environment, which is really, really nice.
I think what Pej is referring to, like with the codename Juno tool, right now if you're a database developer, you probably do a little bit of development using SQL Server Management Studio, some of it within Visual Studio, and use something like BIDS for report designing. It integrates and brings all of those together into a single tool, targeting both cloud or on-premises environments, and it's got a whole lot of other features as well. So I'd encourage you to watch some of the videos that we have on it, like Lance's session from PASS last year. So
yeah, that's a good point. So here I've got a data connection. It's pointing to the same SQL Azure environment that I just uploaded my database to. I've created a very, very simple report. If life is good, I will run this report and you'll get to see it. And basically all I'm doing now is I'm creating a report inside of BI Developer Studio. I'm pulling data in from the cloud, and as I said, it's a very, very basic report. I want to deploy this to my own SharePoint environment, so what I'm going to do is just make sure that all the endpoints are in my own private cloud environment, and then all I do is hit deploy. Right? So I've packed, just like how you would, if you're familiar with reporting services, this is exactly the same thing. The data is coming from SQL Azure, but everything else is running within my own local environment. And I'm going to show you what this looks like within my SharePoint environment in a second. You could use, ideally you want to use BIDS to do all of the deployment, but you don't have to use it for all of the report creation. You can use Report Builder and build out reports using Report Builder, and then you need to add them to a project into reporting services and then push that out into SQL Azure reporting, into on-prem. And you can do exactly the same thing for SQL Azure reporting, which we'll get to a little bit later.
So he was using on-premises reporting technology, and if you notice the URL, it's completely connected to the cloud database that he created earlier. So you're pulling your data from the cloud, but you've got a report that you've designed on-premises and which is being deployed on-premises. But the source of the data is cloud data from SQL Azure.
Yeah. And then while that is going, the other thing I wanted to show you is, let me just, so I don't have to type all of this in. So here's my SQL Azure instance. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a Power Pivot model. I'll just select from other sources. One of the first items is Microsoft SQL Azure.
So this is really cool. You can connect directly to a cloud database from within Power Pivot, pull in all the data, and work with it.
Do the same from SSIS as well?
SSIS works with SQL Azure as well. Yes, you can. SSIS, BCP, a lot of the existing SQL Server tools.
So there's my time, expense, and track. As any good developer, I make sure my connection is good. And we'll fire this off. And here I can just go and pull some, here are the tables, and I'm just going to bring back a couple of them. And we're done. And then I'm just pulling that data in from SQL Azure into Power Pivot, and then I can just go about creating my own report and publishing this into SharePoint. And the nice thing about Power Pivot into SharePoint is that as long as SharePoint knows how to talk to that SQL Azure instance, it can go and refresh this data. I don't have to create it again. I can pull it and update it and so on. Let me see if this is, yeah, so there's my database instance. Here's my on-prem version. There's the expense report that I created. Right, so any of the tools that you're familiar with, Report Builder, reporting services, will all be able to consume SQL Azure data, publish it locally. Users can subscribe to it. It's exactly the same reporting services environment that you're familiar with, just the data is just coming from a different location.
Yeah, you had a question?
Say you have an on-premise data mart, and you're populating it with ETL, whatever, regularly, and now you decide you want to put it in Azure, and you showed us the import and export, but how do you keep it updated like you're keeping your data mart updated?
That's a great question. How do you keep the data updated after you've imported and exported it using that tool into SQL Azure? And we're going to cover that.
Yeah. I do want to caveat
Sure.
that. I mean, it really depends on the type of data and the operations that you're doing in the cloud. So we don't have a direct translation for a lot of those on-premises BI technologies in the cloud. So we just want to show you what is possible with the cloud and BI today. A lot of those features will be built into the cloud over time. But regarding your specific question of how do you keep them synchronized, for a subset of those type of activities that you want to do, there are technologies to help you do that, and I'll later show you a demo of SQL Azure Data Sync that can keep an on-premises database synchronized. But I don't want you to think that that's the solution to all of your problems. What you described is a lot more complex than that. Right?
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
How about security, user security? Do you need to define those on the SQL Azure platform, and how this will integrate with your local domain if you are using Windows or something?
Got it.
So the question is, what are the security considerations for moving your data into SQL Azure with on-prem?
Yeah. So one of the things, like in the current scenario that Pej described, he was using a SQL Azure database, and there are many ways to secure it. At the database level, it uses the same authentication, authorization type of things. And authentication, I want to give a caveat. Right now, we only support SQL Server authentication and not Windows integrated authentication, right? But the authorization rules and everything are supported here. But additionally, all communication to SQL Azure is over SSL, so it's encrypted. And in the SQL Azure Management Portal, you have this feature called Firewall Rules. So what you can do is you can say, I only accept incoming connections from this IP address or from this range of IP addresses, and you restrict access that way. So that's another way of restricting it. And over time, we'll build more enterprise security features, like people have been asking for features like transparent data encryption and things like that. So these are all things that we are looking to in the longer term. This has been a paid service since February of last year, but it's proving to be quite popular.
Yeah, I think that's a good point in that it's SQL authentication today, right? So you'll have apps that are not just SQL authentication that you may want to consider. And not every app should move to the cloud, right? So those, again, one of the consideration points.
Yes, there's a question there.
For the other technologies like SSRS, SSAS, are they all available in SQL Azure or some of them are available?
Yeah, like we were saying, this is something
How
that
about we get to that one?
Okay, we'll get to that.
We'll get to that. Keep that on the back burner. Now, you had a question, yes?
One of the things we're having to do today is to build a separate security database so that we can control what user has access to what we do and what we do with those. Yours is a great example. Marketing. Our marketing people can access marketing data only. So we have this separate security database that we want to build. In the model that you're showing now, where would that live? In Azure or on-prem?
If you have, so this question is that
Could
we
you
have
repeat
the
question?
you have security in a database that then doles out security to the other applications that are going to consume it. So if it's at a database level, so it's using SQL authentication, or it could live on-prem or it could live in. Yeah, that's fine, because when I do a report call, I'm going to make a call to your data, to whatever the security database is, to go, am I allowed to X, and then it's going to validate that against the application, right? So if you're doing SQL authentication, you're fine. It's more if you're doing Active Directory or you have other Kerberos or other things that you're doing, that's not going to work with SQL Azure today. Yeah, it's a good question. Okay, do we flip back to you?
Sure.
All right. But I get to do a command prompt demo. That was kind of, for a command prompt. Yeah, I know. See, that was, I was sitting there going, am I really going to do a command prompt demo? Okay.
So I'll transition a little bit over here. What Pej showed you was an example of using all the tools that you're familiar with today. The only difference was you're connecting to a data source in the cloud. And from the show of hands earlier, it seemed like not too many people were familiar with SQL Azure. So I'll just spend a little bit of time going through SQL Azure and what it is, and then we'll have some more demos and show what else is possible. Right? So SQL Azure is part of the Windows Azure platform, and the Windows Azure platform is a set of cloud computing resources, a platform provided through Microsoft data centers. So the idea here is to up-level all the platform features to provide them as a service so that you don't have to build out the platform yourself. You simply consume it as a service and take advantage of it to build your applications. So what that specifically means in the context of SQL Azure is that you get to provision a cloud-based database, which is very different from an on-premises database. You're not setting up a VM. You don't pick a specific hardware SKU, install the OS, install the database software, configure things. Instead, you're simply consuming a database as a service, and I'll show you a demo of that in a minute. It's got 3 core components right now: the core database service, which provides an OLTP database, SQL Azure reporting, which Pej will demonstrate later, and something called SQL Azure Data Sync. Right? With that, let's go and investigate these a little more. First is SQL Azure Database. It's a cloud-based database, and the important thing to remember over here is when you provision a database for yourself in the cloud, you're really provisioning a logical database. So you might see it as one database, but behind the scenes, it's physically distributed among multiple databases in a horizontal scale-out cloud manner, right? And this is completely abstracted from you. You think of it still as one entity, but the implementation of that is hidden, And some of the advantages over here is we take care of, the high availability, fault tolerance, all the platform software, patches, updates, and so on. And you can focus on just consuming it as a service. In fact, with the SQL Azure, I mentioned there's one logical database that you interact with. But behind the scenes, there are actually 3 copies, 1 primary and 2 secondaries. And we keep them alive at all times, right? So if the node to which your request was directed to had failed, you transfer to another node that has another copy of your database. Remember, part of the economies of scale that you get from the cloud is that you have this massive shared infrastructure that's shared by multiple tenants, right? And that's how you get the economies of scale from the cloud. And the idea here is you're using a scale-out model as opposed to a scale-up model where you pick your hardware and you throw more resources at it and you just create the environment that's best suited for you. But the problem with that approach is the costs don't go up linearly. It just goes up spiking. Whereas with the cloud-based model, it's designed for people who want high availability and scale at a lower price point than traditional scale-up architectures. Right? So just to give you an idea of how this is architected behind the scenes, you might notice we've got a whole collection of nodes there, all of which is running SQL Server as the core DB engine. That's how we get to use the same programming model, the same T-SQL-based commands to interact with it, and so on. So you have multiple machines, and your own database, which is shared with multiple others on any one of these nodes, there are 2 other replicas on other machines, right? And transparently behind the scenes, when you make a call to a logical database, we do the job of translating it to any one of these physical databases. We also manage fault tolerance, scalability, and availability. Right? So if any one of these nodes gets hot, the request may be transferred to another node that picks it up. So let me show you what this looks like. Oops, my slides have all. So I've just logged into the Windows Azure Management Portal. And if you look in here, you see some of the things I was talking about earlier, the compute, reporting. Here's the database option. And you'll notice this is my subscription, right? Within that, I have a server. And the server, again, is a logical server, not a physical server. I can go create a new server. And, oh, this is the database, sorry. I need to be on the server tab to create a new server. Going here. No, this is still. Ah, hang on a minute. Oh, yeah, that's right. Sorry. Yeah, so you can create a new server here. Thank you, Andrew. And you can select a region. This roughly corresponds to where we have data centers around the world. And once you have a server, I'm not going to go through the process of creating it. You can create databases within that server, right? If I wanted to create a new database, you simply go in here and say you want to create a new database. Just call it like TestDB. You can choose the web or business edition. And really, that's all it takes to create a database. And I've got a database in the cloud, right? At the server level, you can even set the firewall rules that I was talking to you about earlier, and restrict access. Yeah.
Global data center. From the previous slide. I get this. This makes sense. If you're in one area, one region, it makes perfect sense. When you're servicing multiple countries, multiple regions, and you need to deploy a database that services all of those, would you need to go through the process of creating a server for every region? The same database you're serving?
So her question was, if you're serving a global customer base, and she gets the fact that we have data centers in multiple regions, how would you go pick a data center, right? And if you had to deploy it to multiple centers, or do you have to? Well, that's one of the things that you need to look into, like when you design this, like, where are most of your customers? Look at the latency issues that may arise, and pick a data center that's closest to your customers. Now, if you want to have multiple databases, some of which are closer to your customer, sure, you can go through this and create multiple databases. And another thing that you could use is our SQL Azure Data Sync technology, which I will get to in another slide, where you can have multiple databases in different data centers, and you can keep them synchronized using the Data Sync technology. Right?
Okay, so you can literally create one and then just sync it across every other region.
That is correct. Right. So this should give you a feel for how simple it is to create a database in this environment. You might have noticed Pej typed in a URL to connect to a database earlier, and these are like the qualified name over here of each of the different databases. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with this Manage tab. We had a project called Project Codename Houston, which was an entirely web-based management interface for SQL Azure. Of course, you can use SQL Server Management Studio, which you saw Pej using earlier. But if you want a lightweight, web-based management interface with no client-side footprint at all, this would be it. Right?
Yeah.
So,
like you're vacationing in southern England and someone exactly calls you, you can just jump in.
so you can go in there and access your
Ooh, that's fancy. That's
tables, design your new queries, and so on. Right? So with that, let me get back to the slides. It was just an overview of the database, and it's a good segue into data sync. So what is data sync? It's a technology that provides bidirectional data synchronization between SQL Azure databases that are in the cloud, or between SQL Azure databases that are in the cloud and on-premises SQL Server databases. So let's look at the first case, synchronizing SQL Azure databases in the cloud. What are some of the scenarios where you might want to use that? One of them is the scenario that you brought up earlier, where let's say you have customers in Singapore and you want a data center that's close to them. We have a data center in that region. So you might have a database there, and you have another database in North America to serve your North American clients. So 2 different data centers. And you can keep them synchronized through the SQL Azure Data Sync service. The other is on-premises to cloud data synchronization. A lot of our customers have said, hey, we like this idea of moving to the cloud, but we're not going to move all our data to the cloud. We want to move a subset of the data to the cloud. And this supports many different scenarios. Like a scenario that we commonly see is right now there's data that's within organizational silos in companies. A lot of times companies want to extend the reach of that data to reach partners, branch offices, mobile devices, or other business units. So with data sync, you can move a subset of the data to the cloud to SQL Azure and keep it synchronized back with your on-premises database using this service. I got to mention the SQL Azure Data Sync service is itself an implementation of a general purpose sync framework. Right? So it's a no-code configuration service that's built using sync framework technologies. Yes? No, it's not built of the same stuff as replication. This is more like a merged replication type of method. Right? Yes? Yeah, so his question is, do you have something the equivalent of a linked server, right? Perhaps linking a SQL Azure database with something on-premises and running queries across? Well, currently, that's not possible. You would have to do that in your application layer, right? Bring things. And what's that?
Yeah, in the application you develop, that's where the logic would go.
There are many different ways to do that. A lot of these, implementing an OData head in Azure is relatively simple, right? And that would be a great way by which you can take a lot of data from multiple sources and integrate it in Power Pivot like you wanted.
Is this sync real time?
It is not real time, and let me just show you the interface in just a minute, right? Okay, so if you want to see what this looks like, hang on 1 minute. So this is the Data Sync CTP2 interface. By the way, Data Sync is in CTP2. We expect it to become generally available later this year, right? As a full-fledged service in the Azure platform. One of the first things you would do is create a new sync group. So I could just call this test sync group. And you can select a database to add to this group. Notice these were the same databases that I had in my Azure portal, right? It's easy to add a new database to this. You simply need to go in here, register a new, and type in the URL that you saw in there. I've already gone ahead and done all of that, so I'll just go pick a couple of databases, like StockTrader DB. I'll add it to the sync group. StockTrader DB Spoke, and add it to this group. One of them needs to be the hub, because this follows a hub-based model of propagating the changes. And then I go in here, and you can pick an entire database or just a subset of the database, pick the tables that you want synchronized, and you can even set the sync intervals over here, right? Like right now, the smallest interval we offer is the 5-minute sync interval, right? Now, if you were to pick an on-premises database, it's almost exactly the same. Notice one of these databases is an on-premises database. The way I got that in here was I simply went into agents, I generated a key, and I ran a service on premises, right? Where I registered a local, SQL Express database. And when I start the service, it connects to the cloud using the key that I'd provided from there, and it gets registered, and the rest is just the same. All right? So that's something on data sync. And with that, I'll hand it back to Pej. Oh, all right.
Could you go back and talk about the second bullet from the bottom? Handles issues when the same data is changed multiple occasions.
That's right. So there are some sort of conflict rules that it observes, one of which is the hub wins type of approach. So if you have in each synchronization, let's say you've got two databases that are sort of spokes, and then you've got a hub, and a synchronization happens, and they both happen to update the same field. It's like, A did it, updated a field, and then B did. A's changes are taken with the hub wins approach, right? A lot of these rules are documented in our TechNet wiki site, and so you can get details on how the conflict resolution happens. Right? Yes?
For the sync model, when you're, I noticed you can pull up tables.
Yes.
From a local database, but can you pull up views or the results of a stored procedure or something like that? Because I can see wanting to do my ETL work, but not want to dump it into a table before I set it up.
Right now, we only support tables and not the results of stored procedures, but I don't know of plans to support that yet. So I can find out.
Maybe views at some point?
Yeah, possibly. Mm-hmm.
Does this sync provide on the data as well as on the metadata?
Yes, it's the data as well as the metadata. In fact, one of the databases I had there was a completely empty database, right? And I just synchronized it and got the data.
What's the cost associated with this?
So the cost, again, it varies depending on the size of data that you're moving. When you said cost, did you mean like performance-wise or in terms of money that you have to pay for it?
Yeah, is it just the bandwidth cost money?
Right now, if you're using the CTP of data sync, if you're not using one of the free offers, yes, you would accumulate some nominal bandwidth charges depending on how much you're using, right? In future, as far as monetizing this goes, we haven't made any statements to it. It may be part of our regular SQL Azure offers, or there may be some other way to monetize it. Yeah.
How much is it worth to you? That's the question.
Since you're not doing views or stored procedures yet, you mentioned doing partial tables. How do you only want complete data?
No, I didn't mention partial tables. What I meant was you could do tables or entire databases. Sorry, I should have been more clear on that. Yeah. Yes?
If you have money on an Azure database, and if it
Sure. I won't go into the specifics of it. I'll address it at a higher level, right? His question was something around temp tables and how the issues would be resolved if part of your database was on premises and part of it was in the cloud. So think of the cloud as a fairly self-contained unit right now, right? Like I mentioned, you can't do link tables from cloud to on premises. So what you do in the cloud is what you do in that cloud within that constrained space. But that doesn't mean you can't integrate with that either from on-premises tools like you saw from reporting services tools or from Power Pivot, or expose that data through OData and then combine it with on-premises data, right? All right. So, so we've talked about enabling BI from the cloud, right? Connect from Power Pivot to a SQL Azure database, use SQL Server reporting services and connect to data in the cloud. But what about BI itself in the cloud? And let's take a quick look at that. One of the features that we have is the CTP of SQL Azure reporting. So what SQL Azure reporting does is it provides reporting services in the cloud. So what you can do is you can design reports much the same way that you do today, except that you provision and deploy them into the cloud. So you don't have to build out the reporting infrastructure to host these reports and support them. And you can benefit from the cloud characteristics of scale, being able to scale out when you want and scale back down and only pay for the resources that you use. So this is a really cool feature. And right now it supports SQL Azure as the data source, right? But you use the same on-premises reporting tools. You can export it to Excel, PDF, CSV formats. These reports can either be embedded within your Windows Azure applications. You build an ASP.NET application, through a control, integrate that in your Windows Azure apps. Or you can choose to just view the report as is by hitting the URL, or embedding it in an on-premises application. It's just that the report is served up from the cloud. Right. So with that, we'll get Pej to do some demos on this. Right.
Let me see. OK. So as Tarun mentioned, SQL Azure Reporting is in its current CTP. The same tool that I use, so I'm in BIDS again. Just to quickly review, if I look at the data source connection, you can see it's going against that same SQL Azure instance that we had before. This is exactly the same report that I had deployed into my SharePoint environment, but this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to deploy it. Instead of locally, I'm going to deploy it to my SQL Azure instance, a SQL Azure reporting instance, and then I'm just going to hit the deploy button and away I go. As Tarun mentioned, the current limitation is that reporting service, SQL Azure reporting will only go against SQL Azure databases. So that's definitely a key consideration.
Oh, is there a question there?
Yeah, go ahead.
SharePoint runs in the cloud. Could you deploy these reports to SharePoint in the cloud?
If you have SharePoint, basically this is a URL that you can create and you can bring it in. If you want the report web part that is on-prem to be, that's not there quite yet. But you can definitely call a report from SharePoint Online into SQL Azure Reporting. We are working hard to get that other scenario because I know it's key. OK, so I've got my username. So basically it's asking for my user permissions on the SQL Azure Reporting site. I'm going to enter my password and it will go ahead and deploy. All right, so I get that information at the bottom here.
This is newer certification. It's not Windows certification, because reporting services on-premise use only Windows.
That's right. This is a specific authentication against SQL Azure Reporting. So here's the same username that I had. I'm going to log into my portal. It's the expense by department report. I'm just going to verify that it's deployed. Yep. All right, so here's the instance of SQL Azure Reporting. And if you're familiar with reporting services, it's identical to what it will look like in the cloud. The report manager environment in SQL Azure Reporting isn't like the on-prem version, right? We don't have report manager, for instance. We don't have subscriptions there yet, and those are the things that we're working on. But from a user point of view, you can enable identical things. They can export this out to a variety of different formats. I can refresh it, I can print it. You can access this on any mobile device, because of the way it's set up. You can export this as an Atom feed, so I can pull data from here into Power Pivot and We're still working on that last piece, but it will be there by the time we go to CTP. Right, so all of the characteristics of SQL Azure reporting mimic that of reporting services. There's some things you can't do. Primarily, the big one is if I'm going to build my own reporting services application and embed my own code within that, I have no way of deploying that code into SQL Azure reporting. Right, so that's a key concern. But if you're looking general reporting that you've done against a SQL database, you move that database into SQL Azure, you can do reporting off of that and embed it within your apps.
Can I consume web services through the API outside of
So you're going to deploy this to SQL Azure, and then
I'll use the client to call web services.
Yeah. What he wants is like an OData feed or something.
yeah, you can embed the report within your app, but if you want to make the report as a data service that it can consume, you'd probably want to approach it a little bit differently. Right. If you build your own app in ASP.NET, yeah, you can embed the reporting control to call this, right? And then you can embed that inside of your WinForm app or whatever the case may be. I think I understood your question to be, I want to use the data that's populated this and use it. Yeah, we should talk because I'm not quite sure of the specifics and I don't want to lead you down the wrong path. Okay. You would embed, so the user ID and password that I use is what you would embed to control who gets access to the report. Or you would, you got to, yeah, probably wouldn't be the ideal solution for you to deploy in a SQL Azure reporting if you're at that granular level of security. Right? These are things that we're working on to get there. I think we're at our initial CTP. Okay. I think the goal we wanted to show you was same on-prem tools that you have today is what's going to work with SQL Azure reporting. I could have created the report in Report Builder and use bits to deploy that up, right? And then you build my own application to call that report down. I do need to embed the connection, right?
So I've just got one slide to briefly plug OData over here. While it's great that we've got all these SQL data sources, when you think of a world where, there are all these different heterogeneous data sources and clients everywhere, you need a format that speaks the language of the web, but it's flexible enough for data type of operations. And that's where OData really comes in. Today, data is in a lot of horizontal or vertical type of silos. And OData provides a way by which, using standard web protocols, you provide a consistent interface so that data can be exposed to multiple clients. Within .NET, you have WCF Data Services that implements OData, which is like a near turnkey solution for exposing your data as an OData service. And you have clients on multiple platforms as well. This is an open Microsoft's released this as part of the open specification promise. You can go to odata.org. And there are clients for Android, Apple, SAP, a lot of different sources. And so you can consume these data over the web, right? And really, the data is exposed, using formats like, Atom or JSON. It speaks the language of the web, and it supports the type of data operations that you would want, like, querying data, inserting it, updating it, and so on, in a very flexible type of manner. And we'll just see a demo of some of these things shortly. So that's why I wanted to talk about it. But I also wanted to talk about Windows Azure Data Market. A lot of people here didn't seem to be familiar with this. What is Data Market? It's a marketplace for data exposed from Windows Azure. So it supports people who want to distribute data, so content publishers. Think of Thomson Reuters, Data.gov, LexisNexis, all of them, providing data through this marketplace. And if you have premier data sets that you want to monetize, maybe this is a good place to monetize that through, right? It supports, a broad set of clients because this data is exposed through our marketplace as an OData feed, right? And it can be consumed in Excel, Power Pivot, all of these places. So ubiquitous access to this data, content suppliers can supply it into the marketplace. And this is what it looks like. Oops. You can go to datamarket.azure.com, and you can browse data from multiple sources. I mean, all of those categories there. Take something like this. You can purchase it. This is not a free data set, but some of them are free. You can go in there. You can see a preview of the data. You can even connect to this directly from Power Pivot and include it in your applications. And Pej will show a demo of that. Right? So before I switch it over to Pej, one thing I wanted to mention was a lot of you had questions on SQL Azure. So I've got these credit cards over here. So been pre-approved. Don't get too excited. It's not a real credit card. We have free offers on the Azure site, but when you sign up, you're required to enter your credit card information because, in case you go over the free limits, you'll be charged. But given all of you a pass over here, you can come and collect it from me after this. It's a free pass to start, no credit card information required. So it gives you SQL Azure and Windows Azure. So it's valid for 30 days, but enough to give you a feel to play around with it, and then you can try one of our other free options if you like, or go for a paid subscription. So I've got one for everybody. You can come by after this and collect these, right?
Yay, I get a SQL Azure account. Okay, so who's using OData? There's a number of companies that are using OData. OData is very simple. It's an open data protocol, as Thuru mentioned, but it's very simple to create a wrapper around your app. For instance, the Netflix OData feed, if I click on it, it will actually bring back a set of data that they've made available. I think, wait for that to come back. There's a number of things that you can do with it. So this is the XML feed that you get through OData. Here's what when I clicked on titles, I get literally all of their titles. It's a very long list. But you can build some very unique applications with it, right? So I've got, let me see here. I've got a pivot view. So if you've seen Pivot Viewer, this is a Pivot Viewer app on Windows Azure consuming the OData feed coming from Netflix. So this is all Netflix's data. And I can come in here. I can filter on a couple of items, right? So if you saw the demo that from this morning that Amir was giving, you kind of get an idea of some of the things that you can do. But I'm just using a different application for it. So I'm going to look at the last decade of movies that I filtered on. Let me just sort it in a way that makes sense for me. And I can then go in and go, wow, let's look at these high-end movies. And come in, I can scroll into it, move it around, and I can see so I did documentary and classics, right? So you can see The Cove, which is an outstanding movie, and a bunch of others that are on here. I don't know what that plant is, so we'll just move off of that. But you get an idea that you can build some very unique applications, and really what was done here, and if this is netflixpivot.cloudapp.net. You can go in here, and there's actually instructions on how this was built. So if you want an example of how you can use OData and build a very unique application, this is one example of that. Thuru mentioned the data marketplace. If you're on my previous demo from earlier today, this is going to be very familiar to you. But basically what I did is I went to Windows Azure Marketplace, all within Power Pivot. I downloaded crime stat information that was available for free because a buddy of mine was looking to buy a house. So if any of you are looking to buy a home, this is great data to take a look at, especially for the neighborhoods that you might be living in. And basically all I was able to do is very quickly with that data, it was a single table of information, right? It wasn't a ton of data, but I downloaded it and I can then begin to create my own little application. And the nice thing about Power Pivot is I can do that very quickly and easily right within the Power Pivot app. It takes me to Azure Data Marketplace. It allows me to grab the data that I want. I can filter it. Bring it in, and then begin playing around with it and doing some unique things with it. So here all I'm looking at is, I'll do a very abbreviated version of it. So I'm looking at states as a filter. I've got all my cities. I've got the years, and we're going to go take a look at property crime. And at that point, it's up to me to filter this and start looking at the various bits of information. So I'll just quickly recreate what I did before. Did you want to?
So did you show them how you connected to Data Market?
Yep.
Okay.
But I'll show it again because it is just that simple. All right, so here, if we're in common cities, if you're ever around in Redmond, come visit. These are great places to stay. After this, you may want to see where you want to buy a home. Let me add one more. The other nice thing, because now it's in Excel, there's a lot of things that Excel gives me too, right? So here's my data. I'm filtered on Washington, but with Excel, I also know that there are other cities with the same name. So Nebraska has a Bellevue, Idaho has a Bellevue as well, Kentucky, Oregon. Oregon has a Redmond, Pennsylvania has a Bellevue. So Bellevue is a common name for a city. Who knew? But you get an idea. Now it's in Excel. I'm just working with that data locally. I upload this into SharePoint. What happens is that SharePoint can call Azure Data Marketplace, use my username and password to update that information and pull it regularly. Let me go and I don't want to gloss over how easy it was. So basically, I hit from Azure Data Marketplace, right? I bring up a unique dialog box. I want to go to the Azure Data Marketplace, and I can go and download the various data feeds that are available, and there's a ton of them. If I sign in,
Yeah. You just enter the key that you got on that website from within Power Pivot. You pass in your credentials, and it just sucks in the data from Data Market into Power Pivot.
yeah, so this is my data feeds that I have access to. And there's a variety of free ones. There's ones that you get to pay for as well. As you can see here, some of these are paid subscriptions. I just downloaded from data.gov. Once I did that, it popped right into my Power Pivot model. I enter in my unique key, right? And that's unique to every user, right? And then I embed it within my app. I upload it to SharePoint, and away you go.
I think the bigger point here was Data Market exposes everything through OData, right? So it could be any other OData feed, not necessarily from here, and it's just as easy to bring it into Power Pivot and start manipulating this data.
Yeah.
Do you need to install add-in for Excel or for Power Pivot to connect to the marketplace?
It's in the Power Pivot add-in. So if you have Power Pivot, that comes with the Azure Data connection.
There was an update to Power Pivot that put that back in.
Yeah.
The first added didn't have it.
No, that was because before, yeah, the latest add-in. If you go to powerpivot.com, it's a free download.
There's a separate one for Excel.
There's a Data Azure Marketplace specific one that doesn't do any of the things that Power Pivot does. I wouldn't download that one. I'd download the Power Pivot one.
This one, all right?
Any other questions? We're almost out of time.
All right.
Yeah. We were going to see if we could do Crescent on top of an OData feed, but we're out of time, and you don't want to see more slides, so we thought we'd end it there. I think this is the last slide for us, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So I want to talk about the investment themes.
Yeah, so basically we wanted to give you an idea of the things that you could do, how you should think about cloud, especially when it comes to business intelligence. The key there is evaluate the application that you're going to deploy. It's not every app goes to the cloud. It's specific, and we gave you the tenets of things that you should consider, right? Future investments that we're coming out with. There's a couple here. So SQL Azure Reporting is in its current CTP, where this question was, well, what about analysis and some of the other things? We're looking at what SQL Azure Analysis would look like. So how do we take our SQL Server Analysis Services technology and bring it into a cloud environment? What are some of the use cases you're looking for? So I would welcome your feedback on that. What are the things that you're looking for from an analysis services environment into SQL Azure, right? We know connectivity to other lines of business applications, like not all your apps are going to be in SQL Azure. You're going to have a lot of apps on-prem. And you want to connect to those, but use the elasticity of the cloud, because you don't want to provision the systems, right? You want to be able to connect to those, but use your on-prem data. We're investigating what that means as well. Obviously, as you can imagine, things like security are paramount, right? Latency is paramount, right? Because you don't want to build an application and then it takes longer to upload than it did with your on-prem environment. So those are things that we're looking at. And then the other one that the lady asked was, well, what about SharePoint integration? Well, with Office 365 and SQL Azure, there's obviously a natural fit between what we can do with Office 365 and our BI platform. We have that on-prem today. And the goal for us is to bring that same experience into a cloud environment. But that's not, we can work within the private cloud environment. It's really getting into the type of scale that Office 365 provides, and that's definitely a key integration point. So Power Pivot, reporting services, web parts, performance point services capabilities, all of those going into the cloud, as well as new things that you'll hear about, like the BI semantic model and Crescent, those technologies moving into an Office 365 environment. So you have choice on how you want to configure, deploy, and manage your BI applications. Okay.
So with that, we're done, and here are some